Hey everybody, welcome to the weekly news recap for the 25th of November to the 1st of December 2024. So, this week, supposed to remove that tab, never mind, ignore that tab. Right, anyway, moving on. So we had a couple of updates from various different places. I guess there was no big showcases or anything this week, so these are just a couple of games that were announced, and will be coming at some stage next year. So first up is Ayasha something. What's it called again? Ayasha Shadows of Silence. I completely forgot the name of it. Anyway, this is an indie game. It's going to be coming to PlayStation, PC, and I think Xbox as well next year. As you can see, it's got kind of like a modern day stealthy horror kind of thing. So it's got a little bit of like Little Nightmares, Inside, Limbo, Bramble, a little bit of that as well. It's looking interesting so far. I think the main character, if I had any kind of gripe with it right now, is the main character feels like they move too fast. Whatever it is about the animations, they just feel like they move a little bit too quickly, I think. It's like they're really just booking it and like they don't belong there. But otherwise, it's got the same kind of vibe as all those other games I just mentioned, and I like those games. So if it's got that kind of, if that's how it ends up, if that's how it turns out, you know, that might be interesting. Also, we got some weird looking Titan-like guys, and that horrible eyeball with hands in the eyelids. Gross. Anyway. It's a teaser trailer for PC, but I believe it's coming to PlayStation as well. Next up, Light of Motorum. Yeah, I'm just gonna let you just watch the video for a bit, and you tell me what game this is. You tell me if this is a sequel to something you've already seen before or not. I don't know. Certainly starts off a bit Terminator-y. It'll very quickly get to the point, though, that this is very much a carbon copy of one of Sony's first-party exclusives, we'll say. Anyway, it's more than a little bit Horizon Zero Dawn. Maybe a little too much Horizon Zero Dawn. I don't know. It's a little Palworld versus Pokemon here. If they're going to do anything significantly different to Horizon. Versus significant difference between Palworld and Pokemon was Palworld is almost entirely real time. There's no turn-based combat or anything like that. It's got that kind of building of structures and that kind of thing. Plus there's guns, I guess. That's a little bit different. Otherwise, this is just Horizon. Now there is a survival mechanic in this game, like reading into the blurb about it and whatever features that are going to be in it. But yeah, it sure seems like it's just Horizon. Yeah, it's pretty on the nose, really. Horizon and a little bit of Destiny with the floating thing beside you. But anyway, yeah, they're not beating the allegations here. Anyway, that's Light of Motorum. No, I keep saying this name wrong. Motorum. It's like motor, you know? That's what they're going for, I guess. Anyway, Horizon Light of Motorum is coming next year at some point. This is from Tencent, I believe, if it wasn't obvious. Just doing a carbon copy job for Horizon. Whether Sony will go after them for it, I don't know. If there's significant difference, who knows? You know, Ubisoft didn't go after Warner Brothers when they made Shadow of War, even though that was obviously Assassin's Creed. You know, or Rocksteady didn't go after them either, even though that was obviously Arkham Asylum, and so on. So this one's a little bit too much on the nose, though. Even the art design, the art direction are much the same. But it does have that base building mechanic. It might be enough to get away with it. We don't know. But probably more a case of to see what happens between Palworld and Pokemon. It's possible the combat is maybe a bit more Monster Hunter than what Horizon is. Horizon's got more of a stick and move mechanic to it with the bow and arrow, whereas this is really more of a I mean, Monster Hunter does have the stick and move thing as well, if you happen to take a bow, but you can obviously take a lot of different weapons in Monster Hunter, and it can become more of a just go toe-to-toe with the big monster. Yeah, I guess we'll see. We'll have to see more of the game before we could say for definite, but it certainly does look on first look that's just Horizon. Anyway, all right, last one for new games anyway. So this is Dante's Ring. It's not a porn, I promise. it's not a gay porno. Anyway, Dante's Ring is some kind of survival-y type thing. I think the deal is that it's kind of like a Pacific Drive thing. But rather than it being a like exclusion zone SCP weird thing, the way Pacific Drive is, Dante's Ring is more of a hey, there's an active volcano, and more than active, it's like actively erupting volcano right now, and you are stranded in the most local area of the volcano, and you have this ash skiff thing. Seems to be your vehicle of choice. It's not clear what the actual game is. Like the only thing we have from it so far is this trailer. The trailer has you in and around the volcano. You have your heat-resistant suit, hazmat suit thing. How required that is, it's not really clear because you did see wildlife that were surviving it at least. The blurb says it's an anti-combat survival thing. So I think that most of the idea is that it's just you versus the volcano. It's just survive and get from point A to point B, and don't get killed by the volcano along the way. I think that's kind of the deal with it. But yeah, early access next year. Okay, so this is a new game. This is announced by a Palestinian developer, Rashid Abouede. I almost certainly said his name wrong. He's previously worked on a game called Lila and the Shadows of War. You can find that on the Google Play Store or the iOS App Store. It's also on PC as well, running a bunch of awards. Initially, when it came out, Apple actually refused to put it in the game section. They wanted to put it in the news or the references section, but they were eventually bullied into putting it into the game section. Despite winning a lot of awards, Abouede says he has struggled to make headway in the industry ever since, and he attributes that to publisher wariness over the politically sensitive nature of the thing. Lila and the Shadows of War was about the Palestinian and Israel situation from the Palestinian viewpoint. And their new game is called Dreams on a Pillow. It is currently going after crowdfunding because it has proven impossible to find a traditional publisher for these kinds of games. So Abouede has decided to go for crowdfunding the game via Launch Good. Launch Good primarily focuses on Muslim projects from Muslim people, and the other reason being that the vast majority of the popular crowdfunding platforms don't actually recognize Palestine as a state. So that's obviously a problem going from the beginning. So they've gone with Launch Good. The game Dreams on a Pillow will be a mixture of stealth adventure and interactive documentary set during the Nakba. The Nakba would be the period in 1948 where Palestinians were violently displaced from their lands and homes by Israel, and it's proving all the way through into the modern day. Anyway, so they're hoping to get some crowdfunding through Launch Good. It's not just a solo dev effort. This is being created by a bunch of veteran game developers from all across the globe. I'm hoping to bring this to fruition. So, disclosure, I have backed it. It's pretty straightforward getting set up on Launch Good as well, so there wasn't any real issue there. I think it's important to get these kind of stories out, and if the medium to tell the story through video games works better than telling it through news and articles and Wikipedia and what have you, I guess that works. If it helps. Anyway, link will be in the paste bin as well if you want to check it out yourselves. Moving on, the Plague Inc. people are back with a new game called After Inc. Revival, so it's a little bit different to their old game. If you're not familiar, the Plague Inc. games It's essentially a simulation of you essentially starting a virus or a disease and seeing it spread across the world and the globe. And the goal of the game was to have complete infection, basically, of the whole globe, and had a bit of a sort of morbid resurge when the COVID pandemic and lockdowns were going on. People were playing Plague Inc. I don't know, as a way to cope maybe with it, but seeing if, hey, could we make COVID and could COVID take over the world? And yeah, maybe, sorta. The developers, Endemic Creations, also made a kind of variant for Plague Inc., which was mostly based on like starting from the point that the whole world had been infected, and then seeing if you could spread a cure all the way across the world instead. It was the same deal, just sort of inverted the goals. Anyway, After Ink Revival is kind of going from a similar position. You are starting with a zombie apocalypse has happened. We've moved a couple of generations past it now. People have lived through it. And now you're basically trying to resurrect civilization. And that's kind of the deal with it. And it's going to be a little bit more involved in Plague Inc. It is kind of billed as more of a 4X thing. So you're a little bit closer on the ground. You're not looking at it from a global standpoint that you did with Plague Inc. It's a little bit more local. It's also not clear if it's set in the real world or if it's a fictional universe. Unique blend, strategic simulation, civil builder, mini 4X. Yeah, it doesn't mention if it's actually set in the real world or if it is just a created place. AI content disclosure, tiling, textures. I don't know. Anyway, it's coming to early access some stage next year. Speaking of early access, we have Chronosword. Chronosword is this kind of isometric action RPG that's kind of going a little bit closer to something like going closer to something like Demon Souls, Dark Souls, than it is to Diablo. Diablo is a bit more of like a power fantasy, just, wading through just hordes of demons and, having these incredible powers at your call and what have you. Chronosword is not that. Chronosword is you're going to get your ass kicked a lot, and you better be good at the game, or it's, you're not going to get very far. That's kind of the way they're going for it here. They're planning to have early access. I'm not sure if the release date, December 6th. So pretty soon. Next week. You'll be able to check that out on early access as well. Okay. Finally, we have a couple of delays. So Rift of the Necrodancer was originally slated to be out some stage this year. Obviously, we're getting to the end of the year, and we have heard nothing about a release date, so it probably comes as no surprise that it is now scheduled for 2025. Instead, 5th of February. To hit a 2024 launch date, we would have needed to do some serious crunch to polish and bug fix, so they decided to not do that. Let everyone enjoy the holiday break and get back to doing development in the new year. So 5th of February 2025 for Rift of the Necrodancer. If you're not familiar, Crypt of the Necrodancer was this sort of hybrid rhythm action game and dungeon crawler at the same time. Enemies all moved to the beat. Your character also had to move to the beat, and depending on different interactions with the environment, what you moved towards, what you moved away, how close to the beat you were, would improve your movement through the dungeon, whether you were able to take out enemies or whether they took you out or collected different items, that kind of thing. Rift of the Necrodancer is dialing it back a fair bit. It's going just all in on the rhythm action bit. There's very little, I think there's no dungeon crawling. There's a little bit of like life sim elements to it outside of the rhythm action stuff. But for the most part, it is kind of a Guitar Hero thing. What sets the Necrodancer games apart a little bit is that you're not just hitting, pressing the button as the beat arrives or holding the button as the beat arrives. It's actually based more on the enemy type itself. Like some enemies move twice on a beat, or some enemies only move on the second beat, or some enemies move across on the beat, or something like that. And it's being able to recognize what enemy you're fighting and what tactic you're meant to use to beat them. So that by the time they reach you, you press the correct button. It does eventually boil down to press the button at the right time. That's a rhythm action game at its core. But Necrodancer is a little bit different. It's based mostly on the enemy you're fighting rather than the song that is playing. Anyway, 5th of February for that. They have decoupled the releases. That was their phrasing. To basically say that the PC version will be 5th of February 2025, and then console versions will be sometime after that. When exactly, we don't know. And then some more delays. Devolver has delayed a couple of games, and in pretty typical Devolver fashion, they couldn't just tell you we delayed the games. They had to host an awards show called the Devolver Delayed, the 15th annual, even though this is not the 15th Devolver Delayed. Anyway, in typical Devolver fashion, it's pretty funny. It's only like 5 minutes long. Watch the video yourselves, but the basic gist of it is Baby Steps, Stick It to the Stickman, and Skate Story have all been pushed into next year. So if you are unfamiliar or have forgotten what those games are, Baby Steps was kind of shown off one of Sony's State of Plays, one of the PlayStation things. And it is QWOP. I guess it's a walking simulator, but unlike those other walking simulators where you just hold the W button and you walk, you have to actually do the walking yourself. You have to use analog sticks or the mouse, and I actually don't know how it's done on keyboard and mouse. Using analog sticks and the triggers, I think, on controller is how you're meant to actually move your character's feet, which makes it a little bit like QWOP, or like GURP, the mountain climbing version of QWOP, which was hilarious as well. Anyway, that's been pushed into next year. Skate Story is, I think it's what's shown here. It's in this picture. It's kind of like an over-the-shoulder Tony Hawk's, but it has this really cool visual style. You're like this kind of glass, I think you're a demon technically, but you're like a glass humanoid skating through this kind of ethereal environment, picking up these crystals and what have you, doing tricks. To be honest, the more interesting part is when you fuck up the trick and fall off the skateboard, because you're made of glass, you just hit the ground and shatter. Visually, it's very appealing. I'm not sure if people will deliberately fuck up the trick just so they can see the animation. I don't know. And then Stick It to the Stickman, I think, is a kind of roguelike, like physics combat silliness shenanigans. I'm not entirely familiar with it myself. Stick It to the Stickman is a groin-kicking, staple-gunning, chainsaw-wielding, roguelike brawler loaded with high-impact, physics-based combat, copious amounts of copy, and weaponized farts. Alright, so it is very much a comedy slapstick brawler type thing. Anyway, all three of those games have been pushed into next year. Okay, so a little bit closer now into next month. The PlayStation Plus monthly games for December have been announced. So this will be the last PlayStation Plus for this year, for 2024. It's also the last one for Sony's 30th anniversary, and it's a little bit not very anniversary for them. Maybe the PlayStation Plus Extra and Premium in the middle of December will be a little closer to a 30th anniversary, but this is not very, like, none of these are PlayStation first party or developed or anything like that games. Anyway, you got It Takes Two from Hazelight. It is a purely co-op platformer adventure type thing. Myself and Melvin played this on the channel earlier this year. It was pretty good. We had a good time. If you want to play it yourselves, you do not need a second person to have PlayStation Plus to play it. As long as one of you downloads it and the other downloads the demo, effectively, you can both play together. It is strictly a co-op game, though, so you can't play it solo, unless you want to play with two controllers, but that's going to be very difficult. Anyway, but I thought it was good. It's a good game. Aliens Dark Descent, we talked about this because it was actually part of Xbox Game Pass as well. So we talked about this last week, but it's the same game, except it's on PlayStation now instead. It's a real-time strategy combat game set in the Aliens universe. So think XCOM, but not turn-based. Basically, everybody moves all at one time. It's chaos. Anyway, and then Temtem is Pokemon. It's just Pokemon. Anyway, every kid dreams even about becoming a Temtem tamer. I don't know. I think they dream about becoming a Pokemon master. Anyway, exploring the six... Well, I dreamed of being a playboy, but that didn't work out for me. Anyway, exploring the 6 islands of the Airborne Archipelago. Discover new species, make friends. Embark on an epic adventure. Catch... Definitely not Pokemon. Battle other tamers, not masters. Defeat the ever-annoying Clan Bilsato. Yes, not Team Rocket, Clan Bilsato. It's just Pokemon. Right, anyway. moving on from there. Those are some of the games you can play soon. What if you wanted to play something right now? You can play Neon Blood. So Neon Blood is a kind of pixel art with like real-time lighting and real-time shading and that kind of thing. It's sort of a neo-noir setup. You are a detective. It's got a bit of an iRobot vibe to it because it seems your detective has one robot arm, I guess. The actual gist of the story, I actually don't know. I've been trying to avoid finding out what the story is because I do want to play this because it looks interesting. Anyway, obviously the art is very nice. The pixel art as well is also very nice. It does have a kind of... I don't know if it's turn-based combat. Just get into it there. I have a feeling it is turn-based combat, but it's not entirely clear. And then how much of the game is combat and how much of it is just detective stuff. It seems to lead with the detective mechanics, so I'd imagine most of the game is detective work, and then secondary is the combat elements to it. Anyway, that's Neon Blood. And then Enigma of Fear. Most of this trailer is an animation. It's a very good animation, but it doesn't really show off the game. So I'm going to skip ahead to the actual gameplay elements. But Enigma of Fear seems to be your character, or characters rather, be playing as this young woman with the dog for the most part of the game, but I do believe you play as other characters. And you are looking for an older gentleman who may or may not be your father in this kind of abandoned mansion. It's very Resident Evil. It's very Alone in the Dark kind of thing. It is a kind of survival horror type game. But you do have a friendly dog, and that's pretty cool. And as long as nothing happens to the dog, I will be happy to play the game. Anyway, this is Enigma of Fear. It is currently PC only, as far as I'm aware. Potentially, it might end up on consoles at some point. New Arc line. We talked about this a little while ago as it kind of announced when it was going to be entering early access. It has now entered early access. So New Arc line is a CRPG, so the top-down thing, like Baldur's Gate, like Neverwinter Nights, like a lot of those kind of games, Disco Elysium and so on. It's set during a kind of magic steampunk situation, and I think the gist of it is there's some sort of animosity between technologists who want to go all in on this new electricity steampunk stuff. And then there's people who are like, no, nature, magic, and so on. Magic is important. We shouldn't be ignoring it or trying to destroy it with technology and so on and so forth. So you've got like the two opposite sides of these things, and deciding on which side you want to be on, I guess. Can you choose neither side? Probably not. Anyway, last one. This is more a port. So Nine Sols has been on PC for a good while. I mentioned it, I think, 2 weeks ago, maybe, that it was getting a port to the different consoles. It is now released. So it is on pretty much everything at this point. Nine Sols is a kind of side-scrolling... It's kind of a side-scrolling Sekiro, I believe, is the way it's been... it's the way it's been described. It is certainly punishing combat. It does have some kind of Metroidvania elements to it as well, so unlike kind of Souls games, or Sekiro, which is in some ways kind of linear. You very rarely are required to go back to earlier areas unless you deliberately ignored enemies or something and wanted to work your way backwards. I believe Nine Sols does have some element of backtracking to it in the Metroidvania ways of things. Anyway, unfortunately though, it is now time to talk about the worst part of video games. The video game industry. So, 31 years, Shuhei Yoshida is now leaving PlayStation. After 31 years, PlayStation is losing one of its most important senior names and an important voice for indie games. Shuhei Yoshida is yet to announce what is next. So this is pretty grim news, to be honest, for Sony. Well, probably not for Sony, because they seem to be very happy doing what they're doing lately. But I think in the long run, this will be seen as not great. He's not being forced out or anything. He has, or at least that's what he's saying. He has elected to move on. Anyway, so Ushin Kyunk, I don't know how to pronounce that last name. It's talking about how he was a champion of indies, which he very much was when he came on the scene. He was always about getting smaller games and getting them more visibility. That's why a lot of indie games did really well on PS3, PS4. And him stepping down is a reason why we haven't seen many of them in the PS5 generation, but whatever. After more than 3 decades, Shigeru Yoshida has announced he'll be stepping down from his role as the company head of Indies Initiative. At his tenure at PlayStation, he has been involved with 429 titles over his entire career and was a strong voice for indies at the company. He was president for Sony Interactive Worldwide Studios around 2008. That would be in and around when the PS3 started. And he stepped down in 2019, which is in and around when the PS5 started. Just have a look at how the indies were treated in between, and you'll see why he was a very good voice for indies. Anyway, take one look at his Twitter, and you'll see how important indies are and were to him. His Twitter banner is 9 Sols, the game we just looked at. That's in his bio. Is promoting it, that it's coming to PlayStation. Indies are very important to him. Anytime there was a gaming event or show, or E3, Gamescom, TGS, even the smaller ones, you'd often see him at them, and he'd be over at the indies booth and talking about the indies. You'd see a lot of studio visits from him. On podcasts, he'd always be talking about a lot of indie games and stuff like that. He was very much a advocate for independent development. Even he himself, as part of this PlayStation blog interview, would say even at events like E3, he'd always go over to the indie game area, and being head of the Indies Initiative was a dream job for him. It always felt like, yes, it's very much something he wanted to do. And head of the Indies Initiative didn't exist until they created it. It always felt to me like it was like forcing him into a different position, so he wasn't president. And they could then go down the avenue they've gone now instead. That's how it always felt to me. But I don't know. He always seemed very happy doing his indie stuff. I just felt Sony were in a better position when he was in a place of power there. Anyway, he joined PlayStation in February 1993. Has a lot of good memories there. His proudest moment, though, is when Journey got the Game of the Year award. Journey was distributed through the PlayStation Network. This would have been, again, around the PS3 era, kind of the beginning of downloadable games, just in general, for consoles. This was pretty new, and straight up just digital-only games. So Journey did not have a disc version. It was a digital-only, small game. You can finish playing the game within 3 hours, but that game won Game of the Year against all these AAA titles. I think for the first time in the industry, it was. It was the first time an indie game had won Game of the Year. Creator Genova Chen did a talk at the summit. He talked about a letter he received from a girl who lost her father, and she thought about her father when she was able to move on in her life. The whole audience stood up, and the whole room was filled with happiness and an amazing feeling that the small game could have such a big impact on people's lives. Even now, when you look at the Game Awards, it's pretty rare to see an indie even in contention for Game of the Year, and let alone actually winning Game of the Year. Now, a lot of that has to just do with how awards shows are run. You have to submit your game for consideration, and submitting your game for consideration is money. And if there's one thing indie developers don't have, it's money. So I would say a lot of that was PlayStation putting the money forward to submit it. Because I believe Journey is partial. I believe the studio behind it was partially funded by Sony at the time. So whether it was really an independent game is obviously a bit of a question. But anyway, it certainly wasn't a big AAA blockbuster. It wasn't the typical type of game that wins Game of the Year. Very much so. Even now, it's still not the typical kind of game that would win Game of the Year. Anyway, so he hasn't said what he's going to be doing next. Be curious to see if he opens his own publisher. I'd be wondering if he could get investment or funding or something, because that would be a pretty good move for him. Certainly put him a lot closer to the indies. He wouldn't have Sony's backing or money for it, but he also wouldn't be held back from them either, from talking about indies that aren't on PlayStation or haven't talked about coming to PlayStation. You know, he could talk about any indie game then in that case. That's kind of the direction, if you know, if he's not obviously not going to be coming back into power in Sony. So if I wanted him to go anywhere, obviously he should go wherever he wants to go, even if that means leaving the game industry entirely. Like, he's been there for 31 years. I'm sure he's fucking sick of it at some point. Anyway, we wish him well. Moving on. Steam antitrust lawsuit expands to include anyone who has paid a commission to Valve since 2017, which is basically everybody? Every developer, rather? Okay, so this is springing out of a 2021 antitrust dispute from Steam, which is now expanded into a class action lawsuit. So this was taken up by Wolfire Studios and Dark Cat Studios. They basically allege that the 30% cut that Steam takes, and because they're a monopoly, this effectively makes them, it's like gives them an unfair advantage or something unfair advantage. Give me money. Anyway, so the original case concerned just those two studios. It has now been expanded out to a class action. The lawsuit now applies to any developer, publisher, or individual who have honored Steam's 30% cut on any and all purchases on or after the 28th of January 2017. That's fucking enormous. That's practically every game, every developer on Steam. So they filed a new lawsuit earlier this year. The original claim was dismissed the end of 2021, but they eventually filed a new one, and it's the new one that's been converted into a class action lawsuit. So the lawsuit states that Valve is using its market dominance to take an extraordinarily high cut from nearly every sale that passes through its store, which exploits publishers and consumers alike. I wouldn't say it's extraordinarily high, because most of the platforms do that. 30% is almost the industry standard. Now, you could argue that that's too high. And potentially it is. Not knowing the numbers myself, I couldn't necessarily argue, but it does seem a little bit too much. It is, however, the standard now. So trying to say that it is extraordinarily high, it isn't, because if you look at all the other platforms, they're all the same, except for Epic. And Epic has their own axe to grind with Apple for that. That's the reason why they take less. But they're kind of the outlier here. It's not Steam that's the outlier, you know? Now, should the number come down? Yeah. Particularly for indie devs? Big AAA publishers? No. They could stay at 30%. The really annoying thing is that the bigger publishers can get sweetheart deals, and they end up paying less of a cut. Whereas the smaller devs, the ones who would really benefit from a lower cut, they don't have that kind of leverage. So I'm not entirely sure whose side I'm on. I'm mostly on the side of the developers, independent developers, but I don't like that. I suppose what I don't like is the sweetheart deal end of things, which isn't really part of the lawsuit, so yeah, I guess I'm just on the side of developers. Anyway, plaintiffs assert that Valve's platform most favored nations policy, whatever that is, has the following anti-competitive impacts, among others. 1. Steam earns a supra-competitive commission. Arguable. 2. Game companies cannot compete between distribution platforms. Again, debatable. 3. Rival platforms cannot succeed. Again, debatable. Epic. It's hard to say if Epic is succeeding because they're backed by Tencent, and Tencent allegedly is backed by the Chinese government. They essentially have infinite money. So it's hard to say if Epic is failing. Good Old Games seems to be doing fine. Again, not entirely sure. Itch.io I don't think makes a lot of money, but again, I also don't think it tries to make a lot of money. I don't think it's trying to be a big, massive corporation. So who knows? PlayStation Store, the Xbox Store, Nintendo eShop, all seem to be doing fine. Rival platforms cannot succeed doesn't seem correct. Now, it does seem like they're focusing mostly on the PC market. And in that case, Steam is very much the most popular one. But it does also seem like the 30% isn't unique to them, I think. I think if you add in the consoles and the mobile market and so on, it's definitely not unique to them. I am not sure in the PC market just by itself, is it? Because obviously Epic doesn't take as much. Itch.io also I don't think takes very much either. And Good Old Games kind of rather weirdly pays developers to fix their games so they can put them on the store and then sell them. So I really don't know how their commission works at all. There would be smaller PC store after that as well. So anyway, Valve reported that the key findings of Dr. Steven Schwartz, it's the paperwork and the paper that this lawsuit was based off of, was based on faulty methods and improper assumptions. They requested the court dismiss the testimony that Valve is the largest PC video game distributor in the world, with a market share exceeding that of all other platforms combined. I don't know, I think that probably is true, but the judge dismissed Valve's request regardless, so the lawsuit is going ahead. Whether anything will come of it, we'll have to wait and see. I apologize for all the sniffling, I'm still not really that well. Anyway, speaking of markets and unfair commissions and so on, Xbox says it's still blocked from selling and launching games from its Android app. Google says it isn't. This is really more of a technicality than anything else. So this is really a case of whether Xbox is allowed to sell and launch games from its Android app. Google would attest that yes, you are. There's nothing stopping you from selling games from the Xbox app. And Microsoft are like, no, you're blocking us. And the truth is somewhat both in some ways. Anyway, so a US judge has issued a permanent injunction ordering Google to open its Android marketplace to competitors. This came off the back of the Epic versus Apple, Epic versus Google thing, where Epic were annoyed that if people wanted to play Fortnite on iOS and buy V-Bucks, they had to pay more to make up for the fact that Apple charged a commission. And Epic were getting around that by sending people in the app to the Epic website to buy their V-Bucks there instead. Apple were against that. They took them down from the App Store. Epic then sued them for that kind of discrimination, alleged discrimination. And it became a whole big deal, and that Apple takes too big a cut and we shouldn't have to pay them, yada, yada, yada. Similar thing happened with Google. And what happened with Google was Google can no longer enforce the Play Store as the only game in town. They have to allow for third-party Android app stores. And it was a bunch of other things. I think one of them is that they also can't force people to use Google Pay to buy things through their apps. They can use any third-party payment thing. So what this essentially means is Google doesn't get a commission on the apps anymore, or on app payments or what have you. So that hasn't happened yet, because Google have appealed it. But as the law stands right now, they do have to do it. So there's like an emergency stay on it or something like that. It's here somewhere. Google requested an emergency stay to basically say, hold on a minute. Hang on. I think you might have made a mistake there, Judge. Let's talk about this again. Anyway, it's supposed to come into force this month. It hasn't, again, because of this emergency stay. But Xbox, for their part, when they had this news, basically said that starting in November, players will be able to play and purchase Xbox games directly from the Xbox app on Android. So from Xbox's point of view, they are ready to implement this feature, but they are currently blocked from doing so because of this emergency stay. Android's side of it, Google's side of it is, no, you are still able to sell them. You'll just have to pay us a commission. They're leaving that bit out. But they were never blocked from doing it. Microsoft just didn't want to have to pay commission to Google on every sale. That's the real thing. It's the Epic argument again, but Microsoft didn't sue for it. They were waiting to see what happened between Epic and Apple and Epic and Google. So this is what they're going with. Anyway, Google is claiming that nothing is stopping Xbox from adding the feature it's promised. Microsoft has always been able to offer their Android users the ability to play and purchase Xbox games directly from their app. They've simply chosen not to. Brackets, because they would have to pay Google. That's why. So technically they're not blocked, but they would have to pay Google a commission on every sale. They don't want to do that, so they're pretending that they're blocked because they don't want to say that part, more or less. And then there's the thing about Epic Games' long-running lawsuit. So Google's not allowed to pay developers, so they're not allowed to get exclusivity on the Play Store. They can't offer pre-installs of Google Pay, or Google Play rather. They can't force app makers to use the Google Play billing, so there has to be a third-party option. They can't require developers to set a price based on whether or not Google Play is used. So I think at some points, if you did use Google Play, there was a minimum price or something, or a maximum price maybe, I'm not sure. And they're not able to restrict developers from pointing users to external payment options, which is the big one, really. Because this allows Epic to push their Fortnite players to the Epic shop to buy V-Bucks. And this would allow Microsoft to push people to the Xbox store to buy the games directly from there, instead of having to pay Google a commission. Anyway, we'll see what comes out of that. There's obviously a much bigger lawsuit working its way through. But the fallout from it will determine whether or not you can buy games on the Xbox app. What's kind of interesting is you can buy games on the PlayStation app. And that comes through the Play Store, so I'm not sure, actually. Maybe they do just pay Google the commission. I don't know. Anyway, moving on. No. Go away. Assistant. I was going to say go away, the other thing, but that would just put it back up. Anyway, unions for Ubisoft's Barcelona teams sue company over the return to office mandate. So this is another set of workers from Ubisoft suing. Well, not suing them, but being against the return to office thing. So we had previously... we have it here somewhere. So, yeah. So there were a bunch of France-based studios that went on strike. Then Ubisoft Milan employees also went on strike about this return to office mandate, and now the Barcelona team basically is not going on strike. They're just straight up suing Ubisoft instead. So the unions for Ubisoft's Barcelona studio, these are developers who would primarily are supporting Rainbow Six, but they also do some mobile game stuff, filed a lawsuit against Ubisoft's return to office mandate. The mandate currently has employees to work in person for 3 days a week. This has been described as divisive. Several Montreal workers, this being the Montreal office in Canada, this is where it was trialed and then eventually pushed out to the whole company. And basically they were very much against it. Anyway, the unions are teaming with Spain's labor group, Confederación General de Trabajo? Trabajo? I think trabajo is work, or labor maybe? Not sure. Anyway, demand Ubisoft reverse the return to office policy, secure protections for Barcelona staff to continue remote work. Management did not approach them to negotiate, so there's no negotiation in good faith. They're not looking to negotiate with the union about the return to office thing. They just want to ram it through. So their recourse, they felt, was, since you're not listening to the strikes either, fuck you then, we're just going to sue you instead. You'll meet us in court. The return to office choice was made suddenly and without transparency. This would lead to logistical problems with the influx of returning workers. So it does sound like Ubisoft Barcelona's offices might not be able to support a return to office. It might be unsafe for them to do so. And we're talking about that it's already happened in France and Milan, that they have gone on strike. Barcelona just skipped the strike bit, and French and Italian staff at Ubisoft previously went on strike. Barcelona unions are combating policy through legal means. Yeah, so they're not going on strike, they're just fucking suing them instead. We'll see how that goes. It's a bold strategy, Cotton. Anyway, speaking again of more unions, 2K Games motion capture studio votes to unionize. So we talked about this a month ago, maybe, something like that. That the 2K Games California-based capture studio who work on... They do capture for basically all of 2K's games. NBA's, WWE, Bioshock, they've done a lot of things. Basically, the unionization has gone through. This is the first unionization of a motion capture studio in the games industry entirely. We did have the first QA team, which was Activision. Now we have the first motion capture team with 2K out of California. Of course it's California. Anyway, the union will be pushing for better job security, fair pay, and improved working conditions. So, good news. Now it's whether a case if 2K will, play ball with them. Because what we have seen is that the corporate executives don't play ball with the unions. You saw with Ubisoft. They just didn't even bother negotiating the return to office. You've had QA workers split up into different teams in Activision so that they don't have collective presence for the union as well, which lessens their power. They've had a lot of silly shit going on. Microsoft is somewhat untested in unions because they have been so good at union busting that they haven't really had to deal with them, and they've sort of just inherited one from Activision, from that QA team. So we'll see how they handle it. But right now, they're not handling it very well. Anyway, moving on. Speaking of not handling things very well, a majority of popular mobile games don't comply with the UK loot box ad rules. I know, everybody acts surprised. So the current rules for if your game has a loot box mechanic in it is that advertisements for it are meant to tell the person you're advertising to. ASA regulations state that the presence of loot boxes should be disclosed in any adverts for games that feature them, and that it will ban or remove ads that fail to do so. Now, rather annoyingly, it will only remove the ads. It won't remove the game. I feel it should remove the game. You know, make it punitive. Make it really, really bad to not do this. To not disclose that you have gambling in your game. So the majority of the most popular games on Android fail to disclose that they contain loot boxes in UK ads, violating regulations set by the Advertising Standards Authority. Now, obviously, the Advertising Standards Authority don't have the authority to remove a game entirely. The Google Play Store and the Apple App Store, no, Virtual Assistant, they have the last say on that. They're private enterprises. There's not much they can do about it. Anyway, the BBC studied the ads for the top 45 highest grossing games on Google Play and found that only 2 titles make it clear that loot boxes were present in the game. 2. Loot boxes are mentioned in the store listings for only 26 of the games. And only 22 of them were actively being advertised. So it's... The data set is getting smaller. Putting it in the store listings is good, but I don't think it's actually required. It's whether or not it's in the ads, and only 2 of them were actually disclosing it. So it's only 2 out of 22. Although what is interesting is that the majority of the most popular games, almost half of them aren't even advertising. I mean, that should really be a story. Anyway, the ASA has issued several bans in the past. They've banned games from EA, Miniclip, Jagex, all the guys you know, all of them. Experts told the BBC they do not believe the organization is enforcing this properly. Obviously, it's like a lot of these kind of consumer advocate or consumer watchdog organizations, they don't have the power and the money to actually make any real change. Anyway, the highest grossing game on Google Play is Monopoly Go. This was among the games that did not mention it has randomized in-game purchases within its ads, loot boxes. So yeah, the Monopoly guy, Imagine the Monopoly guy doing things against the consumer. Who would have thought? Anyway, moving on. Speaking of bad money things, I guess, Star Citizen funding passes $750 million. The game is not out yet, and is not going to be out for a very long time. Main game is still in early access, like, emphasis on early. Astonishingly early access. Fucking Genesis early access. It's extremely early. Squadron 42, which is meant to be the spin-off thing that would placate users, was supposed to come out this year. It's not coming out to 2026 now. Anyway, this is a news in brief article, which is basically just the headline and this, and that's kind of it. For the love of God, stop giving them money. It's just a money pit. It's just a scam at this point. You gotta stop. Listen to me. Listen to me. If you somehow made it all the way through the stream, stop giving Star Citizen money. Stop doing it. Check your subscription. Turn it off. Give the money to me. I'll do more with it. I promise. By not giving it to Star Citizen. Anyway, moving on. Okay, so weirdly coincidental news in some ways, but something really more indicative of the games industry as a whole right now. Anyway, the next game from Mass Effect director cancelled as studio shuts down. So Casey Hudson's Humanoid Origin is no more as they failed to acquire funding. So, failed to acquire the funding needed to continue. Casey Hudson, you may or may not know, was producer for Mass Effect 1, 2, and 3, maybe, I think. I think he did a bit of Dragon Age. Then he fucked off for a while. And was pulled back to sort of get Anthem out the door. So there was a big report, a big kind of post-mortem about what the fuck went wrong with Anthem. And a lot of it was nobody was making any decisions. Everyone who was supposed to be in charge, supposed to be shepherding the project, would just not make a decision about anything. And the developers were kind of spinning their wheels because they didn't know what was going to make it into the game, what wasn't going to make it into the game, what kind of game they were even making, and so on and so forth. And Casey Hudson was then brought back to BioWare. They wheeled him back in. Just when he thought he was out, they pulled him back in. And he basically made the hard decisions to get the game out the door because it was just burning money for BioWare and EA at that point. I imagine EA gave him a lot of money to come back and just get the game done. And they did. They got the game done. It's not a good game, but I don't think it was ever going to be a good game at that point, but they got it out the door. Same with Mass Effect Andromeda. It was just get it done. We need developers freed up to do other things at this point. So once that happened, Dragon Age Veilguard took off, and I think he fucked off again. He's like, I've done my job, I'm gone. Anyway, despite efforts to shield the studio from broader challenges in the industry, an unexpected shortfall of funding has left us unable to sustain operations. So they can't pay their bills anymore. They can't pay the developers to work on the game while they're not making money. So they had to let roughly 70 employees go from Humanoid Origin, which is a real shame. Hudson is a longtime developer and producer at BioWare, worked from everything from Knights of the Old Republic all the way up to Mass Effect 3. Left them in 2015. He left after Andromeda, okay. Bad Times continued. Wait, no, hang on. Only to return a couple of years later, yeah, and he came back as general manager, that's right, to get Andromeda out the door, to get Anthem out the door, and then he fucked off again in 2020 to found Humanoid Origin, and then since then, we've kind of had the industry going through a drought of investor money and publishing deals. So what's kind of happening with the video game industry right now? People took out a lot of credit-free loans during pandemic to fund development through lockdown, through the pandemic, through COVID, and so on. Problem is, those loans are no longer credit-free. They need to pay them back. So they're only really going to pay and invest in things that they know are a sure thing, and that will make them money quickly, which means a lot of live service shit. Because annoyingly, it makes money. It's why you've seen so many of them jump on the bandwagon. And the flood of those live service games is why you've seen so many of those games fail. Because there's only so much time that people can devote to those games. And they require so much of your time that you're pretty much going to pick one or two and just stick with them. Anyway, the other issue then is investors want to make a lot of money off of video games. The games that make a lot of money take a long time to make, because they need to stack up against other games that have made a lot of money. The God of Wars, Last of Us, Halo, what have you. Not even Halo anymore, Call of Duty, that kind of thing. Think of the kind of money that's required to invest into those kind of games. That's the kind of investment you're asking for, which is a lot of money, obviously. But the problem is they're not going to see a return on that investment for another 4 or 5 years. And they can't wait that long to pay back these loans because their credit score will just tank. So that's the position they're in. How could they get around this? Make smaller games. But nobody wants to hear that, because that also means smaller profit. That's the position I've always taken. Make smaller games. Games do not need to ever go over 40 hours. Or at least the main thrust of the game should not be more than 40 hours. Additional shit on the outside, fine. Looking at you, Persona. Jesus Christ, the game went on forever. Really good game, but holy shit, does it go on forever. And Assassin's Creed Valhalla is just a bloated mess. It's like 120 hours or something. It's insane. But I think it made Ubisoft a lot of money as well, so they're in really annoying positions. Anyway, I said this was a weird coincidence, and it's a weird coincidence because another Mass Effect veteran studio also shutting down. So Mass Effect veteran will pause operations, aka shut down, at AAA game studio we didn't even know existed up until now. So this was Worlds Untold. This is from Mac Walters, who's a writer on Mass Effect for the most part, and then a couple of other things for BioWare. Has announced a pause in operations at his new AAA studio because NetEase aren't funding it anymore. They had been developing a near-future action-adventure game, which sounds like Mass Effect, backed by investment cash from NetEase. NetEase have now pulled out, so they are seeking a new partner to help bring our vision to life. Staff members are now looking for work elsewhere in the meantime, and we did hear this from another studio. I don't remember the name of the studio, but it was basically that the founders and, most senior people were going to continue working on the game, and other people would have to look for jobs elsewhere, but they would hope that they would get funding to finish it or something like that. I forget what the game was. Anyway, it's in a similar position now. We're pausing for now. This isn't goodbye. There's more to come. We look forward to sharing the next chapter with you when the time is right. So Mac Walters confirmed his departure from BioWare in 2023. It was always pretty recent. So it's why we haven't heard of Worlds Untold up until now. But he did work on Jade Empire all the way through to Mass Effect. Did a little bit of work on Dragon Age. Worlds Untold had a writer from Dragon Age, a producer from Dragon Age, also working on it. So they had more than just himself, BioWare alumni. There's a couple of other BioWare alumni. Anyway, when reached for comment from NetEase, why did they decide to pull funding now? Current market conditions have required us to reassess and prioritize our opportunities. It's a very corporate response. We are actively collaborating with the studio to explore potential next steps, provide support during this transition. Now, if you take them at their word, maybe they're going to help them find an investment partner. If you read behind the corporatees, though, this was going to take too long to make us money, and we need money. You know, if he only left BioWare in 2023, he would have only started up Worlds Untold. He would have had probably a non-compete 6 months thing from BioWare, so at least 6 months after that before you could even begin on this. So it's extremely early days, which means, add another 4 or 5 years before NetEase would see a return on their investment. And as I said, they need money now. They don't need the money, but they want the money now. Anyway, last thing for industry bullshit. I'm not sure this really belongs in industry bullshit, but I couldn't think of anywhere else to put it. Anyway, so as we were saying, 30th anniversary PlayStation was this year, and is also technically this month now as well. So over on the PlayStation site, there is this kind of mini site of a timeline of the PlayStation product, if you like, going through the PlayStation, PS2, PSP, PS3, PS Vita, PS4, PSVR, PS5, PSVR 2, and then whatever the PlayStation Portable for PlayStation 5 is called. That will sit here somewhere. If the rumors are true, Sony are working on another handheld. This is a pretty cool site. I know it does take you to the history really nicely. You can move your way all the way up to the PS3, and you'll get to see where Shuya Yoshida became president and where their indie initiative really took off. And then you can go to PS5 and see where the indie initiative died. And they decided to focus on 4 games. And that's it. Anyway, we'll leave that in the paste bin. You can check it out at your leisure. I don't know how long that will be up for. Anyway, we will leave. I guess I'm torn between these two. I suppose Neon Blood is on more platforms, so we'll leave that one to loop. Anyway, that was your news for the 25th of November to the 1st of December 2024. Again, some small games there getting their announcements out before the Game Awards. The Game Awards, I think, is next week at some stage. Probably won't stream it. Because 1, it's very long, and 2, it's usually very late. My time. Just tends to be very early hours in the morning. And then 3, nobody watches the stream anyway, so I don't think I'm missing anything. But yeah, we'll keep an eye on the Game Awards. For the awards, of course, that mean anything at all. They're not just bought in popularity contests and what have you. Anyway, I'm actually most interested to see. The one thing the Game Awards does that I do like is the musical performances and the Game of the Awards, the Game of the Year award musical performance where they do like the themes of all of the games that are coming up for Game of the Year and they mix them together. That's cool. I really like that. The rest of the show, shit, but that part of it I actually quite like. And when Mick Gordon was the musical act as well, that was really good. Yeah, basically the musical acts are the only reason I'd ever really watch it properly. Anyway, and obviously the trailers, but you can find them anywhere on YouTube. Anyway, that's the Game Awards. That's not until next week. This week, some interesting updates. Again, them getting themselves out ahead of the Game Awards. The Light of Motoram and Horizon Zero Dawn. You know, corporate wants you to tell the difference between these two pictures. I don't know. Sure looks like the same picture to me. We'll see what happens with that. It may be a case that Sony will just wait to see what happens between Palworld and Pokemon. And then just use that as a precedent if it goes their way or not, if it doesn't. Anyway, you can always vote with your wallet, right? That's what they tell you, free market and all that. What else do we have? PlayStation Plus update, or refresh rather, for this month. I mean, it's not amazing for me personally because I've already played It Takes Two and the Aliens Dark Descent. If it was turn-based, I would have been all for it. The fact that it's real time, no, I have no interest. And Temtem is again Temtem and Pokemon. Corporate wants you to tell the difference between these two pictures, so not for me. The PlayStation Plus catalog updates maybe in the middle of the month might be a little bit more interesting, and whatever the last two Game Passes are for the end of the year, coming up to the Game Awards, it might be a little bit more interesting. Speaking of Game Awards, Sony will probably have some stuff to show off during it. It's always a question of whether Sony will bother with the Game Awards or if they'll just keep to their own state of play thing. Xbox, I think, is always happy to piggyback off the Game Awards. Nintendo is this kind of the same. They don't really, they're kind of happy to do their Nintendo Direct stuff and their Indie Treehouse things. So it's probably going to be vast majority will be either third-party stuff or Xbox first-party stuff. Anyway, I wasn't meant to get back into the Game Awards stuff, but I did. New releases, Neon Blood looks interesting. Enigma of Fear, the fact that it has a dog in it is probably enough to get me to play it. It doesn't take much, it really doesn't, game developers. Put a dog in the game, I'll probably play it. And Nine Sols, yeah, I had played it a little bit on the Steam Deck. It's kind of shudders a little bit. It runs fine for the most part. It's just every now and again there's some frame drops and it's frustrating. So I wanted to wait until it was on console, and it is now. So that's fun. What was the third game? New Arcline, early access. I personally don't touch early access games until they're not early access anymore. That's me. That's my rule. Is it a silly rule? I don't know. Is it arbitrary? Absolutely. But that's the way I look at it. I don't know. I don't have the time. It's not the time necessarily. It's that I feel like if you want to get into the game on early access, it's because you want to give like active feedback to the developer. And that I don't have. This is the way I'll put it. I wouldn't be able to dedicate enough time to it to give enough feedback that I feel it would be valuable to the developer. That's the way I look at it. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. But that's, in my head, that's how I feel about it. Anyway, industry bullshit. Shuya Yoshida leaving Sony is... Sony don't realize it, but it's gonna be bad. It's gonna be bad for them. This continuing focus on their premium only AAA things has resulted in them having very few releases, and it's gonna hurt them in the future if they don't return to making smaller games in between, smaller indie titles, or not indie titles, just smaller experiences, shorter experiences, cheaper experiences, cheaper games. They don't all have to be massive 100+ hour games. So yeah, that's going to hurt them in the long run, I think. But he has been very good for indie games for PlayStation, particularly in the PS3, PS4 era. PS4, PS Vita as well. A lot of really good games came out under his tenure, or made their way over to the console, which is probably a better way to put it. Anyway, moving on from that, the class action lawsuit with Steam. Again, it's more fallout really from the Epic Apple and Epic Android side of things. It's the same deal of, should these distributors, platforms be able to charge as much as they do? It's another vote with your wallet, free market thing, but they want the government to step in. I mean, here's the usual, which is developers should get more money. The problem is it's not the developers who end up getting the money, it's corporate management above them who actually get the money. And in that case, I don't really care about the cut because the developer rarely sees any of it. It's really only the indie dev that sees it. And in that case, they should be getting it. Steam shouldn't be taking so much from them. But then how much should they be taking? There's an argument that should Steam be a massive corporation? Necessarily, if all it does is distribute games? Or Valve, rather, should they be a big, massive corporation? I mean, the argument then is, should Sony be this huge, monolith? Should Xbox be this massive thing, and so on? If all they do is distribute games. They develop them as well. Does that mean they should have all that money? Valve does technically develop games? Does that dissuade them? I don't know. I'm not really sure where I'm going with that argument, to be honest. I just think it's nuanced, I guess, is the way to go. And nobody likes nuance on the internet, so I'll just stay out of it. The Xbox Android thing is just dumb. It's just Microsoft doesn't want to pay a commission, and that's it. That's the only thing that's holding it up. Even as it stood, they would only have to pay a commission for a month, 2 months? They could push that feature out whenever they want. It's ready. They could have done it years ago, really, at this point. Getting the union out of 2K is pretty good. The 2K motion capture studio, more unions. Every developer, every labor person, everybody who makes the game, who actually works on making and creating the game, needs to be under a union. Really, you do. Unless you're literally the indie dev and you're the one guy who does everything on that one game, there's probably no point in you joining a union. But otherwise, yeah, you really should. Just see how the industry has treated labor. How many? We're probably reaching like 20,000 layoffs probably by the end of the year over the last 2 years. Anyway, Ubisoft Barcelona just going out to sue about the return to office thing. The whole return to office thing is just a big smokescreen and a big, to get voluntary redundancy, to get voluntary layoffs, voluntary resignations. That's it. That's all they're looking for. There's no way any of them believe that you do better work in the office than out of the office. Anyway, I don't remember what the rest of industry bullshit was. Star Citizen, $750 million. Stop giving them money. Just stop doing it. Give the money to me instead. Anyway, that's it for the weekly news recap. Current troubles with the PC are ongoing. I was kind of shocked that it worked at all today. And I suspect it's going to stop working in a few minutes. So I have caved. I've ordered a new PC. Unfortunately, it's not going to be the big gaming PC that I was saving up for. It's going to be something. It's going to be decent. It might be able to run most games, but it's certainly not going to be the I can run anything ever for the next 20 years thing that I was trying to get. So that's a little frustrating, but at least we'll have a PC I can rely on and not have to worry every time I'd press the stream button if it's actually going to do the job or not. So yeah, so until I get that set up, streams are obviously going to be on hold. They've been on hold anyway for mental health reasons, but I am kind of getting back around to the idea of doing streams, and the PC being out of commission has kind of made that a little difficult to do. So hopefully, when I get the new PC sorted, get all my stuff transferred over, and hopefully I don't transfer over whatever the thing is making it go fucking weird in the first place, we'll get back to doing proper streams again. It's coming to the end of the year, which means the kind of tier list review videos that I usually do, and the looking into next year videos that I do as well. The last while they have been streams. Going forward, I think I'm just going to pre-record them instead, because they do tend to go very long, and there's a lot of just messing about with scenes and OBS and shit that I feel is better to just edit out. I don't think it really needs to be a live thing. So I think that's what I'll do instead. Keep an eye out for them. They should be some stage. It's December, it's the end of the month, so they'll be around then at some stage. All right, have a good rest of your day, and hopefully see you next time. Bye.